With some much-needed confirmation and surprising reveals for Nen types, it's a good time to jump into the Hunter x Hunter world once more. And what better way to do that than to rank some of the strongest enhancers in the series? From the Phantom Troop's crazy abilities to teachers and even our main character, we'll be ranking the best of the best. We'll be judging the users based on their power, speed, and proficiency, as well as innate talents and overall experience. Let's get into it. Number 10. Komugi. Our sweet, sight-impaired child comes in at the bottom of the list. This in no way means she lacks proficiency or talent. In fact, it's quite the opposite. She's considered a natural level enhancer by Togashi himself, and chose to use it for specific things. As we know, her main interest was Gungi, and she became the world champion. In some ways, she even set a limitation on herself to make her playing skills more enhanced by admitting if she ever lost, she wouldn't be worth anything and should just die. But that aside, ever since becoming a professional, she never lost a game once. And not even against the highly intelligent and extremely fast-learning Ant King Meruem. And all that talent and proficiency to focus for Gungi, as well as creating her own move, was self-taught, further indicating her genius in that field. Unfortunately, since all she knew and cared about was Gungi, Komugi remained a non-violent, loyal person to the end. She chose to die along with Meruem, rather than leaving and continuing her own life. So there was no chance to see her further growth with time and experience. The person above her has the experience, but he might still be missing something. Number 9. Wing. This bespectacled Nen teacher came a long way from being Bisky's student. He's even the assistant master of the Shingen Ryu style that Isaac Netero created. Though we don't know a lot about what he does as an enhancer, there have been a few instances where he showed off some pretty impressive skills. One of them could be related to Wing raising his voice to be heard even over the crowd of the Heavens Arena. Though this may have simply been done for emphasis. If Wing used enhancements on his vocal muscles to raise the sound, just like Uvogin screamed Porcupine to death, that would be pretty amazing. We also saw him press his hand against the wall and create a massive dent in it with not much effort. Something else that comes to mind is whatever secret technique he taught to Zushi, and the young boy was scolded for preparing to use it. Even Zushi's opponent seemed worried about what was coming. But even with all that, it's not easy to say how far Wing's talent and experience goes. If we knew more, he could be ranked higher. At least he's still alive, unlike the next enhancer on our list. Number 8. Castro. This high-speed fighter had the fortune, or misfortune, of being someone within Hisoka's sights. He was groomed in a sense by Hisoka for a short time, which implies he showed a lot of potential early on. And that was because he managed to get some points during their first match, though he ended up losing all the same. After facing the fearsome clown, Castro almost became a floor master in Heaven's Arena, winning all his matches. He even surprised Killua with his speed and how he reappeared behind him in a flash. Castro was also good enough to read the lie Killua told him about not wanting to face him. In concrete terms, he used his enhancement to strengthen or speed up his body, like with his Tiger Bite fist attack. It makes his hands strong enough to injure human bodies or possibly break through trees. But what he chose to focus on instead of his original typing was creating a double of himself using conjuration and manipulation. Sure, it was good for confusing enemies, at least at first, but once the technique is figured out, he has no choice but to just fight with his clone until he can win. The fact that it required immense focus and couldn't copy the injuries his real body would receive made it easy to see through and stop as well. He used it against Hisoka and was able to fight on par with him for a while, until he was tricked into believing Hisoka could reattach his own limbs. If he had chosen to work on the Tiger Bite technique rather than things outside of this typing, which required more focus and Nen to use, he probably would have been a very powerful enhancer. Wing even confirms that he could have been a master of that technique. But his potential was cut short by Hisoka and his need to look outside of his true calling. Number 7. Best Butler, Goto. As far as we know, Goto was from Meteor City, home of some of the deadliest people, like the Phantom Troop. This could explain why he worked for the Zoldycks, who are the strongest family of assassins we've met so far. They trusted him enough to watch over Killua, who was meant to become the head of the family. It's doubtful they would have given that task to someone they didn't have a high view of, right? One of the first times we see Goto employing his nen abilities is during the coin test with Gon, Leorio, and Kurapika. And from that, we can immediately tell how intelligent he was, and his ease at analyzing situations with a calm demeanor. Not to mention the speed at which he could move his hands, something that comes back during his real nen techniques. Similar to Castro, Goto ended up facing Hisoka in a deadly battle. But at least we get the chance to see the insane speed he had for throwing coins, even impressing Hisoka with that technique. They were even comparable to bullets. Most likely, Goto was able to accomplish this by applying nen to his fingers through enhancements, or maybe even his whole hand. Since Goto was also an emission lean, meaning it was the next type he could be proficient in, it makes sense that he could shoot them that fast during the battle. Goto was even quick enough to hit his own coins away when Hisoka launched them back at him. Additionally, his aim is amazing, considering he used such small objects as projectiles and could still hit Hisoka's cards away. But he wasn't able to read Hisoka fast enough to survive, being decapitated. At least our next enhancer faced extreme situations and still ended up on top. Before we get to them though, make sure to subscribe with notifications on and smash that like button for more videos like this. Number 6. Palm Siberia. Palm is Nov's apprentice when we first meet her, with a transmutation lean when it comes to her nen abilities. At first, she was an erratic, violent, and unpredictable fighter. She was still a strong enhancer prior to evolving, but everything increased dramatically once she did. Just a reminder, Palm was caught by the Chimera ants and transformed through their experiments on her. Previously, she used Merman Clairvoyance, but with the altercations, her technique became Wink Blue and Black Widow. Wink Blue is pretty much just a stronger version of her Clairvoyance though. Black Widow, on the other hand, is an entire body transformation using her hair as armor. It seems to be a mixture of both enhancements and manipulation, since she uses a tangible item to create the outfit. Something else she could do was to detach her aura and leave messages, which is helpful for situations where she needs to be more stealthy or can't stay in one spot for long. But it's not known whether she can still do that after evolving. Once Palm changed through Poof's experiments, she overpowered Killua for a time, and her battle prowess increased with the stability of her mood. An example of her strength is when she broke Killua's 50-kilogram yo-yo with one attack. If that's not enough, Meruem even complimented the beauty and strength of her aura, begging her to let her see Komugi. He could tell by looking at Palm that there was no way she would break, so he had to resort to her humanity. One issue she has is the split between her human and ant self, which caused confusion during her meeting with the king, and even when she was about to injure Killua before breaking out of Poof's control. This could create problems for her in the future, or even trigger trauma that she can't deal with, seeing as she's one of the few surviving ants. Let's get to a more active character now though. Number 5. Nobunaga Hazama. He's the number 1 spider, behind only Chrollo. He's also ranked 9th in physical strength among the troop members, but that doesn't speak for his overall abilities. For one, he's considered comparable to Hisoka by Killua, the prodigy. But he said that of Machi as well. As a sword user, Nobunaga tends to be better at one-on-one fights, but doesn't seem to be bothered about working along with allies. His focus is mainly on sword techniques, and his N is the same distance as his weapon, which is up to 4 meters. I'd argue he stretched that distance when he held the very tip of the hilt to try and stab Yokotani without entering the Hylia hideout. Nobunaga technically did reach the lawyer, if not for Terabellum neutralizing the attack. Even without his weapon, Nobunaga remains a terrifying opponent due to his analytical skills and insane speed. Even Killua recognized he couldn't escape without being sliced or killed when he was captured by the Nobunaga. With his sword in its scabbard, Nobunaga can pull it out instantly and take down whoever he chooses. Regardless, this swordsman has an extremely strong aura, though it's a mystery as to what his Hatsu involves specifically. Shalnark did mention at one point that Nobunaga could be replaced as a spider, unlike the more specialty types like Pakunoda and Shizuku. This implies Nobunaga's technique shouldn't be anything too out of the ordinary, but at the same time, it would be a mistake to underestimate the damage it could cause. It might just be a very simple technique that he honed over time to get it to the level he's currently at. Besides us seeing him use swords and his impressive Iaido techniques, not much else is known about his nen abilities. Thankfully, Togashi did reveal he's a transmutation lean. It could be fun to see Nobunaga's aura changing form, or maybe even make it into weapon-esque substances when he loses his blade. This could come in handy, especially now that his sword was taken away by the Hylia family recently. I'm sure he has replacements, but it could be a good way to find out more about his nen. As much as we love Nobunaga, we have to let his colleague be one step above for now. Finks Magcub. As mentioned, we've got another troop member in the list of enhancers. He's currently bearing the number 5 tattoo, and he's second in terms of physical strength in their group. But Finks is probably first now, considering that Uvogin was killed by Kurapika during the Yorknu arc. He'll still get his time to shine later on though. Back to Finks. The man has immense hand-to-hand combat knowledge that we get to see with him snapping necks mainly. But he did take Killua's skin from his legs when he was trying to stop the Zoldyck from escaping as well. Finks is also great at close quarters combat, even with assassin types like Killua who are trained to escape situations like that. And again, he was fast enough to capture Killua, who was bouncing off of walls to avoid him, prior to the skin ripping off, that is. Finks also pierced through Dalzaline with his bare hands without much of a struggle. As for his enhancement techniques, Finks uses Ripper Cyclotron. This involves him winding up his arms to enhance the power output from his aura. One downside, if we can even say that, is that Finks isn't great at calculating what is enough power and tends to overkill his opponents. He's definitely not someone they would use for torture like how Phaeton can. His rough and violent personality perfectly explains his proficiency at killing, and especially when he uses his powerful enhancement attacks. It's like a boxer winding up for a big blow and getting a TKO with that one hit. If 2 troop members isn't enough for you, there's one more that surpasses them. And you should know by now who we mean. Number 3, Uvogin. As a natural level enhancer, Uvogin was one of the most intimidating characters in the series. He was the strongest physically in the troop, despite being designated the number 11. From what we've seen, his skills lied within close-range fighting, and he was perfectly fine against weapons like missiles being shot at him. Uvogin even resisted poison in his systems that was injected via leeches directly into his body. Being an enhancer, his character involved him being straightforward and confident in himself. He could destroy walls, kill people with one swipe of his arm, and break Kurapika's bones, even though he was using Emperor Time to limit the damage from the attack. Even during his childhood, Uvogin had a massive body and towered over the rest of the founding troop members. As expected, Uvogin enhanced his durability, strength, and likely most aspects related to fighting, including raising his healing factor. And this because all he cared about was brawling, becoming stronger, and facing any and all opponents and winning. He could have been considered near unkillable if not for his tendency to jump into fights without any preparation or foresight. Enhancer problems, am I right? That aside, Uvogin was strongest when he fought alongside others, especially if they needed his protection. One of his best friends was Nobunaga, who we saw fight with him briefly through a flashback, their styles being strikingly different. Uvogin was also seen using clubs in the past, but it seemed he preferred to be barehanded most of the time. Being a talented enhancer didn't mean he stuck to using only that. Uvogin also employed a type of emission technique when he couldn't use his body to attack. He bit the part of the Shadow Beast's head and spit it hard enough to kill the other. Similarly, he had an amazing aim when throwing through a combination of enhancements and emission. We see this when he killed some snipers using some small stones. More specifically though, his strongest Nen technique was Big Bang Impact. It involved a giant expulsion of aura that had been enhanced to its uppermost limit, and crashing down with it so hard that it created an immense crater in its wake. There were possibly some limitations to how this attack worked, such as Uvogin needing to use his right arm specifically, but it's not fully confirmed if that was the case. On the other hand, he was weak against complex powers like manipulation and conjuration, which explains why Kurapika was able to take him down. Not to mention that Kurapika is a conjurer with a lean towards specialization due to his Kurta eyes. But Uvogin's loss all came due to seeking revenge for being caught. That's pretty ironic, considering how much he loved killing those who wanted revenge against him prior to that. Rip Uvogin, but it's time to get to a main character next. Number 2. Gon Freaks. Our protagonist was classified in the skillful level to begin with due to his endless potential and unbreakable will. Even prior to learning about Nen, Gon had enhanced senses beyond the norm and amazing healing skills that had nothing to do with his enhancement techniques that came later. He fought without much rest against Binolt for about 10 days, endured pain no child should have to experience, has amazing reflexes, and even an ease of hiding before learning about Zetsu, like when he trailed his Soka to get his badge. Oh, and for some reason, he has an increased resistance to poisons. After learning Nen through Wing, Gon followed Machi and Nobunaga, who could sense him, but not tell where he was due to his skill at hiding his aura. Speaking of which, the size of his aura was praiseworthy, though lacking in control at times, especially when he was upset. So, for him to have pulled off that little chase with the spiders means he was in a good place mentally. As for Gon's Nen, Jajanken holds his strongest abilities, but even rock requires a lot of charge-up time. Paper is an emitted attack that's not as powerful as rock or scissors, but still comes in handy. And scissors is his transmuted attack that could even cut through lower-level chimera ants. Like we were saying, as long as Gon's mentally stable, his decision-making is solid and reliable, and he can get out of tough spots with a bit of patience. But once he's under too much duress or upset over someone he cares about, then he makes bad decisions that are too reckless and endanger his life. This is how offering all of his future potential to take down Pito comes to pass. Once he successfully did that, Gon became an extreme level enhancer through a vow transformation. In other words, he reached the peak of what he could have become with decades of work. He was believed to be on par with Meruem at that point by Pito, who deemed him an immediate threat. In this form, everything Gon had built up was enhanced to its upper limits. Even just basic co-attacks, like the kick that sends Pito flying up into the air uncontrollably. Gon's enhancer abilities were also greatly improved. He easily subdued Pito with rock from his Jajanken techniques, and continued to use it to finish the Royal Guard off in a brutal way that was definitely reminiscent of Uvogin. Not to mention how he disappeared from Pito's sights altogether for a moment and was outside waiting for them to begin their clash. Even though Gon surpassed Netero in physical abilities through this transformation, it cost him everything. And he's back to square one now, only because Aluka was able to undo the severe damage that it left him with. As it stands, it's currently unknown if he'll work on Nen again, or even be an enhancer anymore when he does return. Before we get to the top spot, here's some honorable mentions. Ramot. He was a chimera ant that was eventually beheaded by Killua, but he also faced Gon and Killua beforehand and tried to get his revenge when he was defeated. He turned his feathers into sharp blades through enhancements, but it wasn't enough to keep him alive. Ikalgo. This ant is one who uses long-range sniping with his fleedom. That's a conjuration technique that is both impressive and reliable. He has all the perks of being similar to an octopus, such as breathing underwater and the ease of swimming. He can also use techniques related to conjuration and manipulation. The best example is when he uses living dead dolls to control a corpse, which gives him access to their Nen abilities. Where is he now, though? Maha Zoldyck is apparently the oldest living Zoldyck and was originally revealed as Zeno's grandfather. We don't know a lot about him, but Netero was stated as the only person to fight him and live, which is saying a lot about both of them. Maha could probably surpass most of the people on this list if he didn't lose half his strength with age. But since he's out of the running, that means number 1, Isaac Netero. Are you surprised that the dearly departed chairman is at the top? Of course not. Being an extreme level enhancer, it means he was at the very peak of his abilities and also mastered many, if not all, of the other typings besides specialization. In other words, he was proficient in manipulation and emission or conjuration, likely including transmutation as well. In some ways, we could argue that Gon's adult form was above his, seeing as his age seemed pretty low to also be at the extreme level. However, with the great toll it took on him and the complete return to base, Netero deserves this spot. You'll see why. As the creator and master of the Shingen-Ryu-style Kung Fu, Netero's teachings birthed other insanely strong fighters such as Bisky and Wing, and likely more to come. He was considered the most powerful Nen user in the world in his youth, but became very adept at hiding his real strength with age. In the past, he went to the Dark Continent twice with not much difficulty, and certainly didn't seem to have been cursed like others were. He was well into his 120s when he died, and it would be more accurate to say he ended his own life for what he considered the greater good. With age, he said his strength was only half of what it was, but he was still able to stop Pito and send the ant flying. Also, Netero may have been underestimating how strong he still was. It's like if someone said, "I had $2 million and now I only have $1 million. That's still more money than most people have." An example of his stupendous power was when he performed over 1,000 attacks in under a minute against Meruem during his 100-type Guanyin Bodhisattva. He could also run extremely fast and called it strolling. His attacks were faster than the speed of sound and impossible for most to counter or avoid. Even Hisoka could tell he was a strong opponent on first glance, back when he was hiding his true power. Zeno, a master himself, praised Netero for being impossible to read. In the world of assassination, that must be one of the most valuable assets to have. And considering Netero was an enhancer, it probably wasn't easy to hide his more upfront nature. If that's not enough, Netero was a master of using Ren, which is the hostile type of Nen. His proficiency with it was so powerful that he even scared Meruem for the first and last time ever. One of his biggest feats, though, was taking down Meruem through his planned explosion, after having lost 2 limbs. He even stops the blood loss in those appendages through sheer control of his muscles. Even prior to the fight, Netero was willing to put his life on the line to succeed. He knew the stakes and planned accordingly, demonstrating his intelligence and strength of character. Not to mention, he paid for Zeno and Silva to join him in the battle, probably to avoid any more unnecessary hunter casualties. He was an amazing fighter, tactician, and chairman until the very end. If not for the Chimera Ants and Meruem's overwhelming power, Netero could have continued living and probably would have helped to stop the current Dark Continent expedition. But that would have created an entirely new story. Did you agree with the list? Is there anyone you think could be joining the top 10 from the 3 families on the ship? Let us know your thoughts below. I'm Anthony Fan, thanks for watching, and have a great day.